We open on the streets of a bustling fantasy city, where two men gossip about a legendary Valkyrie, the very same warrior who just took a young man with her. And now he sits awkwardly with his new, very capable companions. He's been recruited into an all-female adventurers party. He wonders how this happened. He'd always tried to live quietly. His mind flashes back to a very different world. Back when he was Kamidara, a quiet office worker. Peak excitement. He was just another employee at a thankless corporation. A place where sucking up got you further than actual skill. The hours would drag on, his boss always watching. His thoughts would drift to a spicy ramen shop nearby. A sudden jolt, a flicker of something forgotten. He'd suddenly remember. He was a mage. His superior would snap him back to reality. A kick to the desk, the universal sign for pay attention, demanding to know if Kamidara was even listening. While in the distance, the world was changing. Shaken by the sudden memories of his past life, he rushed home, eager to confirm if it was all true. Back in his apartment, Kamidara tests his newfound abilities. The result is a little overwhelming. He struggles to control the sudden surge of power. But with a bit of focus, he adjusts the flow, directing a perfect stream into his instant ramen. 3 minutes later, a magically prepared meal is ready. He admits an electric kettle would have been much easier. As he eats, the memories of his past life grow clearer. But remembering magic and actually using it are two different things. He worries what might happen if this power was ever exposed. The uncertainties and downsides are overwhelming. In a world of peace and advanced technology, magic is all but obsolete. But a thought suddenly occurs to him. If he can't use his power here, he could just teleport back to the other world. A strange sensation washes over the room, and just like that, his commute gets a lot weirder. He's back in his old workshop, everything preserved by magic. He takes a tentative step into his forgotten past. He's greeted by the skeletal remains of his past life, a hand adorned with rings, each a piece of his power. He takes one, a silent acceptance of his old identity. And with that, the old vessel begins to dissolve, crumbling away into nothing but dust and cloth. Kamidara thanks his past self for this legacy. He recalls that he was a wielder of star magic, a power unlocked only by mastering every element. Entry-level stuff. His teleportation skill came from years of research. He even finds his old bag, a gift with near-infinite storage. He decides against a permanent move to this world. After all, he's far too used to the comforts of home, so he'll simply live a double life. A mage on his days off and a corporate drone on weekdays. Talk about work-life balance. 3 months pass, and Kamidara hones his skills. Facing down monsters with a newfound confidence, he unleashes a simple stone bullet spell, with devastatingly precise results. The beast dissolves into nothingness before him. This has become his new routine, a tedious but necessary grind. He carves into the beast's hide with a knife. Another small creature lies defeated at his feet. He's harvested a sizable cut of meat from his kill. After a quick look around to ensure he's alone, he sets up a simple magical perimeter, for privacy. He preserves the meat and extracts the magic stone. With his work done, he decides to head back. His first stop is the local Adventurers Guild, where he's greeted by a cheerful receptionist. He trades in his loot, a simple transaction for a day's work. He reflects on how he's settled into this new routine. The receptionist slides over his payment for the day. He accepts the coin pouch with a quiet thanks. But the receptionist seems to have a question for him. She asks if he plans on being a solo adventurer forever. She quickly gets flustered, thinking she's been too forward. But Kamidara reassures her that he's happy on his own. It's all part of the one rule he set for himself. A rule for surviving his two-world existence: never stand out. Using his old, powerful magic would draw too much attention, risking everything. He chose this town and this rank for a reason. But the receptionist seems genuinely concerned for him. She insists that a mage of his talent deserves a better party. Kamidara politely declines, preferring his quiet, leisurely pace. He turns to leave, the matter seemingly settled. But she calls out to him one last time. His next stop is a local butcher shop, a familiar place he's visited many times before. He sells off a normal-looking amount of orc meat. From his totally not infinite bag. But something about the exchange gives him pause. As he walks, he's stopped by a familiar voice. It's the daughter of the innkeeper where he stays. She greets him with a cheerful smile. He sees she's busy sweeping up the fallen leaves. She explains that she's just trying to help her parents. Seeing her struggle, Kamidara offers to lend a hand. With a flick of his wrist, he summons a small gust of wind, neatly collecting every last leaf into a sack, just your average leaf blower. He explains it's a small thank you for their hospitality. And with the chores done, he decides to set up a barbecue. He places a grill over the collected leaves, and with a bit of magic starts a clean, smokeless fire. He offers to share the orc meat, an invitation she happily accepts. With his guest secured, Kamadaira gets to work, laying out perfectly cut pieces of meat onto the grill. He prepares them on skewers for easy eating. The two wait patiently as the food sizzles away. Just a casual afternoon barbecue with a side of magic. Soon the first skewer is ready. The innkeeper's daughter takes a tentative bite. Her expression says it all. Pure, unadulterated bliss. But Kamadaira isn't done just yet. He pulls out a secret weapon from his world, barbecue sauce, drizzling the strange, dark liquid over the meat. The girl's reaction is even more ecstatic than before. He proudly calls it his family's secret recipe. From the Aisle 5 family. But he holds up a finger with a single warning. The sauce comes with a potent side effect for her breath. She's mortified, but the flavor is just too good to resist. Kamadaira simply smiles, happy to share this small piece of his world. This is the life he's chosen. Quiet days, good food, and simple connections. He reflects that while nothing major happens, this life isn't so bad. A few days later, he's back at the Adventurers Guild, cashing in his latest haul for a meager sum. But a sign for a daily special catches his eye. Apparently, Earthboar is on the menu, and it's dirt cheap. He decides to stay for a meal. An offer the receptionist seems keen to take him up on. Kamadaira, however, remains completely unfazed. She explains the guild also runs a tavern, but he's not interested. He clarifies he's only here for the cheap steak and nothing more. A booming voice calls out his adventurer named Tyler. It's a fellow adventurer, a mountain of a man named Magus. He asks about the day's hunt, and Kamadaira shares his modest earnings. Magus laughs, teasing him for being a strange solo mage. He insists a mage of his talent could join any party he wants, but Kamadaira isn't interested, knowing his secrets make teamwork impossible. Still, Magus offers his help if our boy ever needs it. Kamadaira appreciates the offer, finding their casual acquaintance comfortable. But Magus has one more question for him. He asks if he's noticed anything off about the town lately. He explains that the monsters have been acting strangely numerous, a fact that Kamadaira has also noticed on his hunts. The veteran adventurer's gaze is sharp with concern. He suspects something powerful in the forest is driving weaker beasts out. Kamadaira quietly considers this new, unsettling information, but Magus tells him not to overthink it, finishing his meal. Kamadaira isn't too worried, since his real home is a world away. Still, he decides he should probably look into it. For the plot. Their conversation is cut short as Magus tries to order, and a woman with long, flowing hair turns to face them. The whispers identify her as Elsa the Valkyrie, a mithril-rank adventurer. Magus has heard the stories, but Kamadaira seems unimpressed. She's known for leading an all-female party that dislikes men, and yet, she's walking right up to Kamadaira, asking for a moment of his time. Our boy, however, is not interested in the slightest, but Elsa's gaze is unwavering and intense. Kamadaira decides to simply ignore her, hoping she'll just leave. A foolproof plan. A plan that fails immediately as she marches right up to his table. He looks up, his quiet meal suddenly interrupted. She leans in close, her expression dead serious. She leans in and whispers that she knows his secret. A threat coming from a legendary warrior. Kamadaira is stunned, asking what she could possibly know, and now the entire guild is watching them. He tries to play it cool, denying he has anything to hide. A totally believable performance. But she calls his bluff, threatening to shout it for everyone to hear. He glances around the room, realizing he's completely cornered. He knows that would be a disaster for his quiet life. He wonders just how much she could possibly know. He considers the worst-case scenario, silencing her or fleeing the country. With his quiet life on the line, he has no choice but to agree. Elsa seems pleased, suggesting they move to a more private location. He bids a quick farewell to a very confused Magus. As they leave, the guild's whispers follow them. High school cafeteria vibes. But Elsa walks on, completely unfazed by the attention. Kamadaira follows, wondering how she could have possibly learned his true identity. He decides to play along for now, hoping to resolve this quickly. She leads him to a large house on the edge of town, calling it her home. Kamadaira is taken aback, realizing she's brought him straight to her party's headquarters. He steps inside, wondering if her entire party knows his secret. He remains on guard, ready for a potential ambush. Suddenly, a young woman with a massive poleaxe drops down from above. Another party member welcomes Elsa home from the second-floor landing. Elsa introduces Kamadaira to her companions. He offers a very awkward, stammered greeting. Smooth. The girl on the balcony looks on in complete surprise. Her shock quickly turns into flustered disbelief. She screams that Elsa actually brought a man home, leaving Kamadaira confused and Elsa with a growing headache. The girl's disbelief echoes through the house. The rest of the party stares, equally stunned. Kamadaira can only stand there, completely bewildered. Her shouts are loud enough to be heard outside. Subtle. The chaos eventually settles down into dinner. Our boy sits in awkward silence amidst the lively chatter. The tense atmosphere he expected is nowhere to be found. He'd prepared for a confrontation, not a dinner party. He asks if he can leave, but Elsa tells him to wait. She insists he stay, offering him a bowl of food. The woman with the poleaxe offers him a bowl of soup. He's still wary, but decides to accept her kindness. He takes a tentative sip from the bowl, and is immediately surprised by how delicious it is. She introduces herself as Widow, offering a handshake. Kamadaira hesitantly reaches out to take it. He notices her hand is calloused and firm. She laughs, commenting on how soft his own hands are. Typical mage hands. The girl from the balcony apologizes for her earlier outburst. She introduces herself as Ryza, the party's scout. Ryza explains that's why she didn't notice him earlier. His footsteps were completely silent when he entered the house. She also notes his arm seems surprisingly toned. For a mage. She then introduces the final member of their party, a young, timid-looking girl in a large witch's hat. She introduces herself as Ruru, another mage. She offers a polite, if slightly clumsy, bow. Kamadaira feels a strange sense of recognition. But Elsa interrupts, calling another person to the table. A stoic-looking archer named Iris steps into view. Iris announces that if Elsa says so, she still refuses to eat at the same table as a man. But Elsa calmly asks her to stay, as they have important matters to discuss. Kamadaira reflects on the party's man-hating reputation. He quickly realizes Iris is likely the primary source of that rumor. With the introductions finally over, Elsa gets down to business. She asks Kamadaira about the rucksack he always carries, calling it out for what it is, a magical storage bag. Kamadaira's eyes widen in complete shock. Ruru excitedly confirms her suspicions, leaving our boy utterly baffled. Ryza explains that her first clue was the lack of sound and weight. She'd seen him at the butcher's before, moving far too easily, and his bag never made a sound, confirming her suspicions. Basic observation skills. Kamadaira sighs, realizing there's no talking his way out of this one. He finally admits that yes, it's a magical storage bag. Elsa clarifies she doesn't want to take it, she just wants him to join them on a quest. A quest to investigate the strange monster activity deep in the forest. Kamadaira tries to make a quick exit, but Elsa grabs his cloak, telling him not to leave. She takes a moment to compose herself, and formally offers him a job as their porter, promising proper compensation. Ryza explains that only her sharp senses could have caught him. Elsa promises that his secret will be safe with them, but she implies that if he were to refuse, her tongue might just happen to slip. Accidentally on purpose. Kamadaira weighs his options, caught in a very polite trap. He considers the offer, thinking it might not be so bad. After all, he has a perfect escape plan if things go wrong. With his decision made, he finally agrees to join them. The party celebrates their successful, totally not coerced recruitment. Ryza immediately asks about the bag's capacity, to which he casually replies it can hold a large house. The party's cheers echo through the house. Kamadaira knows he made the right call by downplaying his bag's true, infinite capacity. With that, Elsa declares the deal is done. She formally welcomes Mage Tyler to their ranks, and Kamadaira accepts with a confident smile. Elsa suggests they prepare to leave the next day, but Kamadaira has one condition. He just needs a little bit of time first. And just like that, he's back in his own world. For a quick errand, where he promptly hands in his resignation at work, explaining to his shocked boss that he's moving to the countryside for a quieter life, and so Kamadaira began his new double life. A mage in one world, a remote worker in another. He sets up a temporary camp deep in the forest, where he diligently works on his laptop, tapping away at his keyboard for hours on end. The true adventurer's grind. The familiar exhaustion of office life follows him, but he manages to finish his work by morning. With his day job done, he picks up his staff, casting a simple healing spell to restore his energy. But as he steps outside, he's greeted by an unexpected visitor. It's Elsa and her party, all geared up and ready to go. Kamadaira can only wonder where his quiet, leisurely life went. As they travel, Ruru enjoys a quiet moment with nature. They venture deeper into the dense, unfamiliar woods. Suddenly, Ryza calls out a warning as enemies approach. A pack of monstrous wolves charges out from the trees, but one is immediately stopped in its tracks by a sudden attack. Ryza moves in, a blur of motion through the chaos. You know, just your average scout. Her expression is one of pure, focused intensity. She cuts down the beast with a single decisive strike. Widow looks up as another attack comes from the trees. Raiza calls out, praising Iris for the perfect shot. A volley of arrows flies past, striking down more of the beasts. The stoic archer lowers her bow, her work done. But the remaining wolves press their attack. That's when Elsa leaps into the fray, her sword held high. Her gaze is locked onto her targets below. She lands with a single devastating slash. And in an instant, the entire pack is wiped out. You know, just a light warm-up. Ruru is amazed by their skill, while Kamadira simply observes. Ruru checks on her companions, offering to heal any minor scrapes. Elsa notes the monsters are growing stronger the deeper they go. Suddenly, Raiza shouts out a warning of another attack. The party turns, bracing for the unseen enemy. But a stone bullet spell flies past them, striking it down. The women can only stare, stunned by the sudden save. They turn to see Kamadira standing protectively in front of Ruru. He just smiles, commenting that it was a close call. You know, just another Tuesday. The entire party is speechless at his incredible speed. Ruru looks at him in utter amazement, praising his skill. Ruru is amazed he could cast such a powerful spell, without even needing an incantation. She excitedly explains the sheer difficulty of his feat to the others. Elsa apologizes for Ruru's outburst, though she's clearly impressed. She admits she's never seen the young mage so excited, which leads her to a very pointed question. Why is a mage of his caliber still a low-rank adventurer? He just shrugs it off, a response that answers nothing. You know, the classic mysterious protagonist defense. Elsa decides to let the matter go, for now. As they venture deeper, Kamadira secretly continues his remote work at night. Kamadira is woken from a restless sleep by a gentle voice. It's Ruru telling him it's their turn for the night watch. The two mages sit by the fire, but Kamadira's exhaustion runs deep. He can't help but wish he was back home, relaxing. You know, the true adventurer's dream. Ruru suddenly apologizes for her behavior the other day. She's still flustered about her outburst over his chantless magic. But Kamadira just smiles, telling her that a bit of passion is good for a mage. Ruru looks down, admitting her mother used to say something similar. He realizes she must have been taught by someone truly skilled. In fact, he sees that Ruru is a talented mage in her own right, with a mindset that feels strangely familiar. He explains that in his time, mages broke down spells for efficiency. But now, 300 years later, the style has changed completely. He realizes her master must have been from an older generation. Ruru suddenly stands, asking him for a favor. She wants him to critique her magic and help her improve. The request triggers a sudden, powerful memory. He recalls his own training with a very similar-looking teacher. A name escapes his lips. His old master, Merlia. Ruru can only stare, completely confused by his outburst. He quickly dismisses it, trying to hide his shock. You know, just a casual 300-year-old memory jog. Ruru asks if he knows her aunt. She explains her aunt was Merlia, the Starfall, a powerful elven mage, and Kamadira realizes the impossible truth: she's his master's descendant. He remembers Merlia, a genius who fused elven and human magic, and his first love. A flood of memories rushes back, moments he thought were lost forever, and the pain of that loss suddenly feels as fresh as ever. He apologizes, explaining his own late master shared the same name. But he can't stop the tears from falling. You know, a totally normal reaction. Ruru gently points out that the timelines couldn't possibly match. He asks if she's Merlia's descendant, and she confirms it's why she hides her ears. He reflects on how his master is now a hero of legend. He offers to teach Ruru in exchange for stories about Merlia. Looking at the young mage, Kamadira makes a silent vow. He won't let his master's descendant come to any harm. The next morning, the party prepares for the day ahead. Kamadira decides to show off a little breakfast magic, perfectly grilling some meat with a simple fire spell. You know, the ultimate camping hack. The entire party is thoroughly impressed by his culinary skills. After a few days, he started to fit in with the group. He even offers to teach Ruru his little trick. Ruru tries to replicate his spell, but the result is less than impressive. A sad little puff of smoke is all she can manage. The others admit that chantless magic is incredibly difficult, but Kamadira is just happy to see them enjoying the meal. He decides to extend an olive branch to the one holdout, offering a perfectly cooked skewer to the stoic archer, Iris. She hesitates for a moment, her resolve wavering, but she ultimately turns away, refusing his kindness. You know, because boys have cooties. Kamadira simply smiles, unfazed by the rejection. He knows breaking down that wall will take a little more time. Later that night, Kamadira has a question for Elsa. He asks if she's sure he's even needed on this quest. He points out that her party is already a well-oiled machine, and that adding him might do more harm than good. Elsa seems to agree, her expression hardening, but she insists her decision was for the future of the party, a future that seems to hold some unspoken threat. She begins to explain, starting from the party's origins with her, Widow, and Iris, a previous party that was torn apart by a man's betrayal, leaving Iris with a deep-seated trauma that affects them all. For very valid reasons, a trauma that has held the entire party back. Elsa explains that to grow stronger, they must overcome this weakness. She admits the magic bag was just a convenient excuse, and that Kamadira is basically a practice dummy for their social skills. He was simply the least threatening man she could find for the job. A high honor. But she's happy to see how much Ruru has already opened up. Kamadira listens, a bit flustered by her blunt honesty. He chews on a calming herb, taking it all in. And in that moment, something within him awakens. He looks up, his purpose suddenly becoming clear. The party presses on, venturing deeper into the woods. But Elsa notes the unsettling silence, a complete lack of monsters. Kamadira realizes the forest's ecosystem is completely out of balance. Basic monster migration patterns. He knows that if this continues, the town will be in grave danger. Iris suggests they send Ryza back to scout for any signs of life. Elsa agrees it's a good idea in theory, but recalls how their last attempt ended in an endless battle. She reminds them that this time, their mission is investigation, and safety is the priority. Iris argues that they need any clue they can get, no matter how small. Kamadira quietly agrees, understanding the weight of their decision. Elsa finally relents, entrusting the scouting mission to Ryza. The scout moves off, a silent shadow in the undergrowth. Her senses are sharp, attuned to the silent forest. She suddenly points, having found a single monster. But before anyone can react, Iris leaps into action. She declares she doesn't need any backup. A classic solo player move. Kamadira calls out her recklessness, but she's already gone. The others give chase, trying to catch up to the impulsive archer. Kamadira and Elsa race through the trees. Elsa realizes Iris might be feeling pressured to prove herself. Elsa explains that Iris is likely feeling insecure, and is trying to prove she can handle things on her own. Kamadira asks if her recklessness is somehow his fault, but Elsa quickly reassures him that he's not to blame. She explains that Iris's past trauma has left her with a deep mistrust of men. Kamadira is stunned, finally understanding the weight of her pain. But their conversation is cut short as Ryza's eyes widen in alarm. They burst through the trees into a clearing, and are met with the sight of a massive dragon. The likely source of all their problems. The party can only stare up in utter disbelief. The beast circles above them, a shadow against the sky, and then it dives, a plummeting force of destruction. Elsa screams a warning, realizing it's heading straight for Iris. Kamadira pushes himself faster, his expression grim. But Iris is completely focused on her original target. Her mind flashes back to the reason she hates men, to the leering gazes and unwanted attention she always endured. Peak male behavior. She'd chosen this path, this party, to escape all of that, to find a place where she could finally feel safe, and with a sharp exhale, she lets her arrow fly. Her arrow flies true, striking her intended target, or rather the tree right next to it. She'd let her emotions get the better of her. And now death descends from above. She thinks to herself that she doesn't need a man's help. Famous last words. But a sudden gust of wind rushes past her. A dark figure moves with impossible speed. She hates men, she tells herself, as the dragon's shadow completely engulfs her. But in this moment, she hates herself even more. Her mind flashes back to her childhood, a farmer's daughter in a small village. A young boy calls out her name, his voice full of hope. He offers her a simple flower, a clumsy but earnest gift, but she rejects it without a word, crushing his small heart. Subtle. Her eyes catch a movement from the side. A group of other girls had been watching the entire time. They accuse her of being cruel, knowing the boy liked her. They surround her, questioning her coldness. The boy, now emboldened by the crowd, shouts that he hates her. She was left alone, branded as arrogant for something she couldn't control. She'd done nothing wrong, yet her looks were a constant source of pain. So she retreated into the woods, seeking solitude, deciding it was better to be alone than to be hated. But a sudden rustle in the trees breaks the silence. A familiar voice calls out her name. It's her grandmother, chiding her for wandering off. Classic grandma move. She asks with a gentle smile what's troubling the young girl. Iris can only look up, her composure finally breaking. Her grandmother sits beside her, offering a comforting hand. and the young girl finally lets her tears fall. Her grandmother tells her that being alone is important when times are hard, but she adds a single important condition. To survive on her own, she'll need the strength to protect herself. It turns out her grandmother was a skilled hunter, and Iris discovered she had a natural talent for the bow. 2 years pass, and Iris's life is about to change again. She's suddenly told she's been engaged to be married. The proposal is from the son of the village chief, a young man who looks far too pleased with himself. You know, a real catch. Iris is horrified, begging them to reconsider. She pleads with her parents, her own dreams of mastering the bow completely ignored, but they dismiss her ambitions, insisting this marriage will secure her future. With no other choice, she makes a run for it as her family calls out behind her. She races up the stairs, her mind set on escape. Grabbing the bow and arrows that represent her only true freedom, she flees the village determined to forge her own path. You know, a classic coming-of-age story, but her escape is cut brutally short. She's caught by her would-be fiancé, his expression smug. He overpowers her, his intentions becoming terrifyingly clear. And in that moment, her world shatters completely. But her defiance was met with brute force. Her fiancé's intentions were clear and cruel. She managed to break free, running for her life. The shouts of her pursuers echoed behind her. They didn't just chase her, they threw stones. You know, classic villager behavior. She hid in the darkness, but they were closing in. It was on that day that her mistrust hardened into hatred. She vowed to live on her own terms, to protect her own space. And now, in the face of certain death, she can only apologize. She closes her eyes, ready for the end. But the end never comes, as a massive barrier deflects the dragon's attack. Kamidaira turns to her with a gentle smile, asking if she's all right. Iris can only stare, her mind completely blank. She stammers his name, her composure shattered. He helps her up, glad he made it in time. He tells her to rest easy. He'll handle the dragon. After all, this isn't his first time fighting one. You know, just another Tuesday. He begins to channel his power, a technique called drafting, leaping into the air with impossible grace. He summons a massive spear of light to face the beast. The dragon lands with a thunderous impact. Kamidaira taunts it from the air, luring it away from the trees. He identifies it as a young fire dragon, a manageable threat. He reflects that it's been 300 years since he's truly gone all out. You know, just a casual flex. He activates 2 of his rings, combining their power, unleashing a devastating spell called Flare Tempest. A torrent of magical energy rushes towards the beast. The dragon is caught completely off guard by the attack. It roars in pain and surprise, and retaliates with a massive blast of its own fire. The 2 attacks collide in a massive fiery explosion. The dragon is thrown back, scorched by the magical flames. Kamidaira notes his attack was effective, but the beast is hiding its true form. He reflects on his equipment, a system his master helped him perfect. His rings and staff allow him to combine any element on the fly. He was never a genius like Merlaya, so he just learned everything. You know, the simple approach. He prepares to unleash a new, devastating combination. A massive pillar of dark energy erupts from the ground. The resulting explosion rocks the entire forest. The dragon stumbles, smoking from the powerful blast. But Kamidaira notes that the beast managed to deflect the worst of it. He scolds himself for taking so long against a mere youngling. He recalls his training, always chasing the shadow of his master. And now he unleashes his true offensive star magic. Raising his staff, he summons a massive rock from the heavens. He calls it a petty meteor. You know, the small, casual kind. The spell crashes down, shattering the very earth itself. A deafening roar echoes through the now empty sky, leaving the dragon defeated at the bottom of a massive crater. Kamidaira looks down at the devastation he's caused, and a single thought crosses his mind. He definitely overdid it. He admits he got a little carried away, not meaning to reveal his true strength, but he had to protect Ruru and the others from the dragon. Still, the full weight of his actions begins to crash down on him. He can already feel his quiet, leisurely life slipping away. You know, a tragedy. A shout from his party snaps him back to reality. They can only stare, their expressions a mix of awe and utter shock. Kamidaira just smiles, deciding he'll figure it out as he goes. After all, he's a mage with years of corporate problem-solving experience. He lands, immediately pleading with the party, who are all still completely speechless. He drops to the ground in a full bow, begging them to keep his power a secret. His quiet life is literally on the line. You know, priorities. Elsa finally snaps, telling him to get up. She looks completely exasperated by the whole situation. But first, she offers a sincere thank you for saving Iris's life. She then turns to Iris, telling her to do the same. Iris hesitates, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. She finally manages a quiet, flustered thank you. Kamadaira points out that she's blushing bright red. She quickly blames it on the dragon's residual heat. You know, a classic case of post-battle fever. But Ruru quickly changes the subject, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She unleashes a barrage of questions about his star magic and rings. Elsa gently holds her back, admitting she's just as overwhelmed. The others can only agree, realizing they'd completely underestimated him. Kamadaira knows they can't hide this. The dragon must be reported. Elsa agrees, but she has one very important condition. Kamadaira explains his condition. Her party takes all the credit. He'll claim he had absolutely nothing to do with it. Elsa is furious, asking why he'd give up such an achievement. But Kamadaira simply confirms that's his wish. She sighs, unable to comprehend his lack of ambition. He just smiles, saying his quiet life is his greatest treasure. You know, a man of simple tastes. With a heavy heart, Elsa finally agrees to his terms. She confirms the plan with the rest of the party. And just like that, the mission was a resounding success. The town tavern is buzzing with tales of the Valkyries' victory. Magus asks Kamadaira to agree with the crowd's praise. He then puts our boy on the spot, asking who his favorite is. Kamadaira's mind immediately goes to Ruru, for personal reasons. But a firm hand suddenly grabs his shoulder. It's Iris, who announces she's finally found him. You know, like he was hiding. Kamadaira is stunned to see her here. He tries to quiet her down, but it's far too late. She grabs him and starts dragging him towards the exit, leaving a very confused Magus watching them go, who then erupts into a cheer, a clear fan of the stoic archer. Magus celebrates his brief, one-sided conversation with Iris. Meanwhile, Iris drags Kamadaira through the celebrating town. She explains she'd been searching all over for him. Kamadaira asks if she could please let go of his ear. You know, a reasonable request. She simply tells him to be quiet, her grip unwavering. He's about to protest when he hears a familiar voice call his name. They finally arrive at the party's headquarters, where a figure waits at the door. It's Widow, welcoming them home with a cheerful smile. Kamadaira can only stare, completely baffled by her choice of attire. She seems to explain that she was just preparing a meal. She nervously adjusts the simple apron she's wearing, admitting that she feels completely out of place in it. But Kamadaira quickly reassures her that it suits her just fine. His simple compliment leaves the tough warrior completely flustered. He explains it's a nice change from her usual battle attire. She quickly changes the subject, inviting them inside for the party. Iris explains that's why she had to drag him all the way here. Widow proudly announces she's prepared a special feast for them. She explains that she's the designated homemaker of the party. You know, a warrior who can also cook. Kamadaira notes that she'll make a fine wife someday. His words leave the mighty warrior completely short-circuited. She explains her father would never accept a man weaker than him. You know, high standards. Iris, however, sees a smooth talker who must be stopped. With everyone gathered, Elsa calls the victory party to order. She begins with a sobering reminder of their own weakness, and how Kamadaira was the only reason they survived. She thanks them all for their hard work and growing reputation, but she warns that their newfound fame brings unwanted attention, and that people may soon realize Kamadaira is their secret weapon. But Iris's pride won't let her hide behind a borrowed victory. She declares her resolve to grow much, much stronger, vowing that next time they'll defeat the dragon on their own. The entire party raises their glasses, toasting to that future victory. Kamadaira thinks this feels less like a party and more like a rally. You know, for team building. He remembers how he once planned to just teleport away if needed, but now he's grown attached. He figures since they all know his secret, their interests are aligned. But his quiet moment is interrupted as the girls call out his name. He looks over, wondering what they could possibly want now. Ruru eagerly asks if he'll continue to teach her magic. And Raiza invites him to come train at her family's dojo. Even Iris wants to know the secret to his flight magic. Kamadaira is completely overwhelmed by all the attention. He decides it's time to make a strategic retreat. A sudden brilliant idea strikes him. He remembers a very convenient skill he possesses, casually announcing he's just going to teleport home, and makes the quickest exit in adventurer history. You know, a ghosting expert. He collapses onto his bed, completely drained, back in the familiar comfort of his apartment, a world away from the chaos he just left behind. But his party can only reach out as he vanishes. The next day, Kamadaira is back to his corporate grind, where he's immediately called in for a lecture from his boss. His coworkers can only whisper as he gets chewed out again. The boss finally dismisses him with a harsh command, and Kamadaira makes the long walk back to his desk. He's utterly exhausted from fighting a dragon all night, you know, a typical Monday. He endures the impossible workload for the sake of his quiet life. As the day ends, he prepares to finally head home. But his quiet escape is interrupted by a junior colleague. The colleague envies his new remote work, asking to be taken out for a meal. He waves a cheerful goodbye, telling Kamadera to be careful. Kamadera breathes a sigh of relief, having almost let his secret slip. He heads for the elevator, reflecting on office politics, when another voice calls his name. The doors begin to close, a brief promise of escape. But a hand suddenly stops them, and a woman rushes in. She offers him a bright smile, happy to have caught him. Kamadera is stunned, recognizing his junior colleague, Sashida. She nervously asks if he's free for the evening. A totally casual question. He agrees to spare a little time, much to her obvious delight. She asks if he'd like to go for a drink. Soon, they're sitting down at a local izakaya. The two raise their glasses in a simple toast. She sighs, commenting on their exhausting day at work. But as she drinks, she looks at him with a curious gaze. She notes that he seems to have changed lately, becoming more rugged. Kamadera's mind flashes back to his other life. He admits to himself that he has been working out. Light cardio with dragons. Sashida admits she's envious of his newfound freedom. But Kamadera just enjoys his meal, lost in thought. He takes a bite, his expression one of pure bliss. He reflects on the skilled cooking of his world, admitting it's far more refined than the other. But his culinary comparison is suddenly interrupted. Sashida playfully prods him with her foot under the table. He looks up, finally pulled from his thoughts. She offers him a confident, almost teasing smile. A long, silent moment hangs between the two colleagues. He wonders if she's had a bit too much to drink. For a weekday, Sashida just pouts, turning her gaze away from him. She calls him out for being far too calm and boring. Kamadera decides it's best not to engage with her teasing. She tells him that boring men don't get very far. A real confidence booster. And with a quick thanks for the meal, she gets up to leave. But a hand suddenly tugs at the edge of his sleeve. Sashida turns back, asking if he's ready for a second round. Kamadera can only look back, completely caught off guard. Eventually, the two part ways for the night, but she wonders if his time with the Valkyries has made him immune to her charms. She waves goodbye, as Kamadera remembers he won't even be in the office. Kamadera looks up at the night sky, his mind made up. With his office work done, he decides to head back to the other world. The next morning, back at the familiar inn, Kamadera is sound asleep, finally getting some much-needed rest. But his quiet morning is about to be rudely interrupted, as Iris throws open his door without a second thought. A gentle alarm clock. Kamadera looks up, completely stunned by the intrusion. She leans over him, demanding to know why he's late. But the innkeeper's daughter rushes in, trying to stop her, arguing that Iris can't just barge in, a point the archer completely ignores. The two women stare each other down, a silent battle of wills. And Kamadera has no idea how to de-escalate the situation. He tries to mediate, taking the blame for being late. He quickly gets dressed, completely flustered by the morning's chaos. Iris decides to separate them, dragging the innkeeper's daughter away. He follows Iris out, apologizing for the delay. The young girl can only watch them go, clearly disappointed. They head out into the quiet morning streets. As they walk, Iris continues to lecture him for his tardiness. He's left wondering why everyone was so upset. A complete mystery. Kamadera listens, his expression unreadable. A few days have passed since the dragon's defeat. The Valkyries' fame has exploded, complete with their own fan club. But since no one knows who really landed the final blow, Kamadera has been able to spend more time with the party, using his magic freely. He and Iris arrive for another day of training, as Ryza calls out to them. She leans against the wall, a playful smirk on her face. Kamadera immediately apologizes for oversleeping, but she just laughs it off. Iris watches them, thinking that our boy is finally back to his old self. The one who isn't dropping meteors. As Ryza leaves, Kamadera reflects that Iris is starting to act like a mother hen. Ryza announces it's time to begin his physical training. He focuses, his expression calm and ready. She explains how to circulate the magic within his body, telling him to feel the flow grow faster and stronger. Kamadera closes his eyes, concentrating on her words, and a moment later, he opens them with a new understanding. Ryza gives him a confident, approving smile, before ordering him to do 100 practice swings. Just a light warm-up. Kamadera grips the sword, his expression determined, his hands tightening around the hilt as he prepares. He swings the blade with a sudden burst of speed, a speed that even takes him by surprise. He feels his body being forcibly enhanced by magic. He remembers struggling with this technique in his past life. but now he feels like he might finally master it. Riza quickly snaps him back to reality, telling him to focus. She shouts out corrections, demanding he use his entire body. The session ends with Kamidaira utterly exhausted on the ground. A gentle introduction. He proudly tells her he lasted longer than he would have without magic, but his body is clearly feeling the strain of the intense training. Riza offers him a confident, encouraging smile. She explains that for a beginner, especially a mage, he's doing great. In fact, she tells him his performance was more than enough. Kamidaira is taken aback by the genuine praise. She ruffles his hair, teasing that he'll be a master in no time. They both take a much-needed break on the grass. But Riza seems to have something else on her mind. She shyly asks if he'll stay for dinner after they're done. A totally casual training partner meal. Kamidaira happily accepts her invitation. She celebrates by promising him 200 swings next time, as a reward. With the day's training done, Kamidaira prepares to leave. Riza thanks him for the lesson, offering her help any time. He just smiles, glad to have made another connection. Iris watches from the doorway as they say their goodbyes. But as he turns to leave, Elsa calls out to him. She suggests he stay the night, worried about him traveling so late. For his safety. Ruru immediately latches onto the idea with excitement. The girls start making plans, offering to study magic and make dessert. Kamidaira tries to calm the sudden, overwhelming hospitality, but Widow steps in, telling them to stop pressuring the poor guy. He can only offer a tired, weary agreement. He promises to return soon to continue Ruru's magic lessons. The party wishes him a good night as he finally departs. He enjoys a hearty meal with the innkeeper's family. When he's not being adopted by a team of super warriors. A few days later, it's time for another lesson. Ruru is deep in thought, struggling with a complex spell. She points to 2 specific runes on a diagram, explaining that their magical circuits are interfering with each other. Kamidaira suggests a way to bypass the interference entirely. He smiles, ready to teach her a new technique. He recalls the problem of bringing the defeated dragon back to town. His bag could carry it, but that would expose his true power. So they came up with a simple, believable cover story. They claimed Ruru was the one with the high-capacity storage magic. A totally normal thing for a young mage. This led to Ruru being tasked with creating her own bag to keep up the ruse. And after some hard work, she proudly presents her creation. A small, adorable cat-shaped pouch. She's absolutely thrilled with the result, and Kamidaira offers his support. He suggests they test its capacity with a nearby crate of rocks. A test that immediately proves to be a bit of a challenge. Ruru struggles to hold the pouch. As the magic begins to fail, and the rocks spill out onto the floor, she can only stare in utter disbelief. She admits her failure, her hat drooping in shame. But Kamidaira tells her to break it down and try again. He knows there's always room for improvement. He points out some unused space in her magical circuit. Her determination returns in an instant, ready to try again. The resilience of youth. He just smiles, happy to see her passion ignite. Ruru listens intently to his advice. He's amazed at how quickly she learns, a true heir to Merlea's legacy. But Ruru suddenly has a thought of her own. Kamidaira suggests she start with a simpler bag design to make the magic easier, an idea she immediately and vehemently rejects. She insists her first creation must be this adorable cat design, for aesthetic reasons. Kamidaira can only stare, completely baffled by her logic. With the lesson over, he heads back to the guild. He takes a quick look at the quest board, realizing he has to go to his real job tomorrow and could use some extra cash. He notes that all the high-paying jobs were taken in the morning, leaving only the usual dregs as the receptionist calls out to him. She teases him for his leisurely afternoon start time. She mentions hearing rumors about him and the Valkyries. Kamidaira just shrugs it off, grabbing a simple orc-slaying quest. The receptionist, however, seems completely unconvinced. She points out that he's alone today, wishing him well on his hunt. Kamidaira can't help but notice her attitude seems a bit cold. For a professional. He recalls how she used to push him to join a party, and now he's left completely confused by her sudden shift. But his thoughts are cut short by a heavy hand on his shoulder. He turns to find 2 other adventurers, teasing him about his size. He simply asks if they need something from him, a response that seems to set them off immediately. He lets out a weary sigh, clearly not in the mood for this. They accuse him of getting arrogant since joining the Valkyries, mocking his supposed role in the dragon's defeat. They ask if he'll share some of his dragon-slaying reward, because that's how friendship works. Kamidaira just gives a vague, non-committal answer, leaving the 2 men completely baffled by his lack of interest. But Kamidaira just turns to leave, ignoring their taunts. One of the men reaches out and grabs his shoulder. The other throws a punch, only to be stopped by an invisible force. He can only stare in shock as his fist hangs in the air. Kamadera's eyes flash, activating the body enhancement he just learned. He grabs the man's face with a single swift motion and slams him face first into the guild floor. He follows up with a quick kick to the other man's gut. For balance. He lets out a weary sigh, the fight already over. He reflects that it was a good chance to test out his new skills. He explains he couldn't use magic, as that would draw too much attention. The receptionist can only watch, her expression unreadable. Instead, Kamadera picks up a brush with a much better idea. He gives the two bullies a makeover they won't soon forget. A work of art. He smiles, hoping this will be enough to teach them a lesson. With that, he leaves the guild to continue his day's work. He reflects that he's seen how sudden wealth can ruin people, and he's determined to protect his quiet, leisurely life. Soon night falls over a very different city, and Kamadera is back in his world, another day's work done. He arrives back at his apartment, another day's work behind him, but he's surprised to find something waiting for him. A large package from his parents sits by his door. Inside is a care package overflowing with fresh produce. He knows he'll have to share it before it all goes bad. He pulls out his phone to send a quick thank you, and is met with his mom's suggestion to bring a girlfriend home. No pressure. The word girlfriend hangs in the air, a foreign concept. He collapses onto his bed, the weight of expectations hitting him hard. He wonders if finding a partner would be easier as a legendary mage. He considers the complications of bringing a partner to the other world. The thought alone is completely exhausting. He decides to just table that idea for now. Indefinitely. The next day, he's back in the other world, where he's seen out and about with the innkeeper's daughter. Later, he arrives at the Valkyries' headquarters. A voice calls out his adventurer name, Tyler. He looks up to find Widow and Reza waiting for him. They greet him with warm smiles, asking what he's up to. He thanks them for agreeing to the rules they set for his teleportation. Reza laughs about the awkwardness of his previous unannounced arrivals. So they've set up a simple system. He teleports to the entrance and rings a bell so no one gets caught off guard. For everyone's sanity. Kamadera is just happy to have a system in place. Reza admits his frequent visits are causing rumors, but it's a necessary step for the party's growth. But today, Kamadera has come bearing gifts. He explains he's brought some grapes to share, but Reza seems less than thrilled. Widow quickly scolds her for being ungrateful since fruit is a luxury, but Kamadera understands her reaction completely. Because the fruit in this country is notoriously awful, he recalls that in the 300 years since his time, agricultural magic has declined, leaving the local fruit hard and sour, so he understands Riza's reluctance completely. She agrees to try just one, her expectations clearly low, but Kamadera wonders if she'll feel the same way about the grapes from his world. He gathers the party, ready for the grand reveal, and proudly presents the legendary fruit he's acquired, Shine Muscat grapes. From the legendary Isle 7. The entire party can only stare, completely mesmerized by the sight. Widow is the first to speak, asking what this strange fruit could possibly be. Ruru marvels at their size, noting they're completely flawless. Even the stoic Iris can't help but be impressed by the sight. Reza is the first to react, her eyes wide with wonder. Widow notes their powerful, sweet fragrance. Kamadera just smiles, enjoying their complete astonishment. The others agree, marveling at the strange, plump green fruit. He explains they're best served chilled, using a bit of magic to cool them. He offers the perfectly prepared fruit to the party. They each take one, still a bit hesitant. But the first bite leaves them all completely speechless. A life-changing grape. Reza is the first to recover, her expression one of pure bliss. The others quickly agree, as Kamadera enjoys his own successful experiment. Reza asks about the price, but Kamadera explains they're a rare gift. Elsa notes that if fruit like this ever hit the market, it would cause chaos. But a hand suddenly reaches for the last of the fruit. He looks over with a knowing smirk. It's Reza, admitting she never expected them to be so good. She's immediately flustered, realizing she's been caught. She collapses in a fit of pure, unadulterated grape-induced drama. A totally measured response. Clinging to his cloak, she begs him for more. Her expression is one of desperate, tearful pleading. Kamadera can only look on, bewildered by the chaos he's created. Reza continues to beg, clinging to him like her life depends on it. He apologizes for teasing her, offering to share the rest with everyone. She looks up, her dramatic outburst coming to a sudden halt. Her expression quickly shifts to one of pure, unadulterated joy. She beams with a bright, ecstatic smile. The power of good fruit. The rest of the party celebrates this new culinary discovery. They all gather around, already asking him to bring more next year. Kamadaira can only smile, a bit overwhelmed by their enthusiasm. Soon, only the empty stems remain on the plate, and so, his connection with the party deepens even further. The receptionist calls out, telling Kamadaira there's a request specifically for him. He's completely baffled, wondering why anyone would single him out. He's about to politely decline the offer. A refusal she seems to have already anticipated. He worries this will ruin his quiet life, but she asks him to at least hear the details. The request is from a beast tamer named Aida, who needs help training her monster. He wonders why a stranger would ask him to babysit her monster. He senses there's an ulterior motive at play, a suspicion the receptionist quickly confirms, admitting it feels strange. But she believes that whatever the client's intentions, Kamadaira can handle it. She asks if he'll reconsider, her expression hopeful. Kamadaira realizes she has a surprising amount of faith in him. He figures he can handle any trouble with his magic, and with a sigh, he finally agrees to take the job. She's overjoyed, promising to treat him as thanks. You know, a totally professional exchange. And so Kamadaira accepts his very first nominated quest. He heads out to the designated meeting spot, recalling the receptionist's directions to a nearby forest. He spots his client, a woman with long red hair and a large beast. The creature itself looks thoroughly unimpressed by the whole situation. The beast turns, acknowledging Kamadaira's arrival. The woman introduces herself as his client, Aida. She offers a formal, almost theatrical greeting. Her expression is one of pure, unwavering confidence. Kamadaira can only offer a flustered response. You know, his usual smooth self. Aida introduces her companion, a beast named Anga Ave. Kamadaira notes that the creature seems surprisingly well-behaved. He reaches out to offer a friendly pat on the head, an offer that is immediately and violently rejected. The beast gives him a look that could curdle milk. Kamadaira is left completely bewildered by the rejection. Aida scolds her companion, telling it to play nice with Tyler. The beast and our boy share a very awkward silence. He clarifies the job. He's just supposed to watch over the creature. Aida explains they're heading deep into the forest, and Kamadaira cheerfully agrees to the terms. She gives him a knowing look, accepting his help. With the terms set, the strange trio begins their journey. You know, just your average monster-sitting gig. But Kamadaira is already suspicious of her story. He decides he'll just find an excuse to go all out if things get weird. As they travel, the beast suddenly leaps into action. Aida just smiles, beckoning Kamadaira to follow her lead. Their path is suddenly blocked by a swarm of lizard-like monsters. Kamadaira raises his staff, preparing a familiar stone bullet spell. His attack strikes down the first wave of creatures, but he quickly realizes they are completely surrounded. That's when Anga Ave charges in, tearing through the horde with ease. Aida proudly explains her companion is a silver rank monster. You know, no big deal. She then turns to Kamadaira, noting he's surprisingly tough for a mage. He just smiles, explaining he's been practicing his body enhancement magic. Aida praises her companion for a job well done, rewarding the beast with a small, affectionate treat. But Kamadaira's suspicions continue to grow. He wonders why she'd hire him when a stronger adventurer would be a safer bet. 5 days pass as they travel deeper into the woods, and Kamadaira continues to juggle his remote work with the quest. The exhaustion of his double life is clearly catching up to him. Without his magic bag, his physical limits are being pushed. You know, the struggles of a non-infinite inventory. He silently vows to never take a job like this again as Aida notes their progress. Kamadaira can only agree, following her deeper into the unknown. Aida announces they're finally approaching Anga Iva's natural habitat. Kamadaira listens in silence, his suspicions still lingering. He notes that Aida seems exhausted, but her movements suggest she's physically capable. He realizes her fatigue must have a different hidden cause. Suddenly, Anga Ave stops in its tracks, sensing something ahead. Aida's confident expression falters for the first time. They've walked right into a clearing filled with more of the same beasts. You know, a family reunion. Her eye widens, a look of shock on her face. Kamadaira realizes they're facing an entire pack of Anga Ives. But Aida suddenly collapses, telling her companion it's finally found its family. Anga Ive can only stare, its eyes wide with shock. Aida calls out its true name, Caricachua. The other beasts look on, their expressions unreadable. Kamadaira finally understands this was never a training mission. He looks over at Aida, the truth of the situation dawning on him. A single tear rolls down her cheek as she looks away. He puts a hand on her shoulder, confirming his suspicions. He asks why she chose him for this quest in the first place. Deducing her plan was to release the beast and blame him for it. You know, a classic scapegoat. Aida turns back, completely stunned that he figured it all out. He tells her not to worry, as a bad reputation suits him just fine. But Aida seems to have a different question on her mind. She explains that the beasts are social creatures, and that her companion will surely choose to stay with its own kind. The pack begins to walk away, leaving the two of them behind. But Kamadera notes that something isn't right. The entire pack suddenly turns, leaping back towards them. Ada can only stare in complete shock. But her companion isn't attacking. It's returning to her. The beast leaps into her arms for a tearful reunion. You know, a happy ending for everyone. Ida can only stare, her composure completely broken. The beast nuzzles against her, its choice made clear. Kamadera watches the scene unfold with a knowing smile. He gives them a moment, understanding this was never about a simple quest. As the day wears on, the truth finally comes out. Ida explains they were both performers in a traveling circus, but the ringmaster ordered her to sell her beloved companion, so she chose to defy him, deciding to set the beast free instead. Kamadera realizes she needed a scapegoat, a mage just weak enough to believably fail. You know, a professional reference. She smiles, admitting he was the perfect witness for her plan. But Ada explains that her plan has changed. She declares this experience has opened her eyes. She can't work for anyone who would take her friend away, so she's quitting the circus to become an adventurer, admitting that it'll be a tough start, working day to day. But she and Caricachua will enjoy a new, leisurely life together. You know, the dream. Kamadera can only offer his support, happy for them both. And so the quest ends, with Kamadera's reputation unexpectedly boosted. The receptionist cheerfully informs him he's now on the fast track to gold rank, a promotion that sends a jolt of pure panic through our boy, as he realizes his quiet, leisurely life is now in serious jeopardy. The receptionist panics, trying to figure out how to keep his reputation down. He makes a hasty retreat from the guild, leaving her calling after him. He finally makes it home, collapsing from sheer exhaustion. The strain of his double life has finally caught up to him. He arranges for some time off, realizing he's more burnt out than he thought. The days begin to tick by as he rests. He spends a full week in isolation, not even visiting the other world. You know, a true vacation. He wonders if his party is worried, just as his phone begins to vibrate. He looks down at the screen, his expression unreadable, and a new idea begins to form in his mind. A week later, he's back in the city,